What if everything you knew about your family was a lie? In 1942, an Army nurse disappeared. Her own country branded her a collaborator. 4 decades later, a shocking discovery proves that nothing was what it seemed. This isn't just a war mystery. It's a cover-up, a betrayal, and a secret that refused to stay buried. Today, we uncover the story they never wanted you to hear. The summer of 1942 was a hellscape across France. Nazi forces pushed ruthlessly through the countryside, crushing resistance and leaving fire in their wake. Villages burned, civilians scattered. Aid stations were overwhelmed with the broken and bleeding. In this chaos, Lieutenant Eleanor Whitford, a U.S. Army nurse with the Evacuation Corps, became known as something of a ghost. Never where she was expected, always where she was needed. She had arrived in France in spring, just 25, fresh from her Army Nurse Corps training. But the young woman in the Red Cross armband didn't hesitate to jump into danger. Soldiers whispered stories of how she moved through smoldering fields without fear, lifting the wounded from trenches while bullets tore past her head. She didn't talk much, but she listened. She memorized names. She kept one photo of her family, tucked inside her medical kit, and never spoke of the home she left behind in Massachusetts. On August 19th, everything changed. That evening, the field hospital near Rouen braced for incoming fire. Artillery had begun pounding the nearby hills. The medical tents shook with every explosion. Inside, medics scrambled to move patients into makeshift shelters dug into the earth. Nurses shouted over the chaos, dragging stretchers, applying morphine, trying to keep the most vulnerable from choking on smoke. In the midst of it all, Eleanor spotted him. A soldier, maybe 19, motionless near the tree line. He'd been thrown clear by an explosion. No one else had seen him. She didn't call for backup. She didn't wait. Without a word, Eleanor sprinted out of the tent, dodging debris, heading straight toward the soldier. A nurse near the edge of the dugout screamed after her, "Whitford, wait!" But she didn't. She reached the soldier, knelt, and began to lift him. Then, another shell hit. The air exploded with dirt, metal, and fire. When the barrage ended, the forest was silent. The tent still burned. The dugouts held the survivors. But Eleanor was gone. They searched for hours, shouting her name into the smoke and ashes. All they found was her medical kit, bloodied, the latch broken, half buried in rubble near a collapsed farmhouse. The nameplate still glinted in the moonlight, E. Whitford. By morning, the Army declared her missing in action. But the real blow came weeks later. A letter arrived at her parents' house in Worcester, Massachusetts. Official military stationery. Cold words, no apology. We regret to inform you that Lieutenant Eleanor Whitford has been executed for collaboration with enemy forces in the French theater. Due to the nature of her actions, she is not eligible for military honors. No funeral, medal, and no recognition. Just the scarlet letter, traitor. Her mother fainted reading it. Her father locked her photograph away. Neighbors stopped visiting. Whispers filled the church pews. What had she done? How could a nurse become a spy for the Nazis? They never spoke her name again. By 1982, Lieutenant Eleanor Whitford was little more than a footnote in her own family's history, if that. Her photo remained hidden in a drawer. Her name was never spoken aloud. The shame ran too deep and too old. But in a twist of fate or bloodline, her granddaughter, Captain Laura Whitford, had grown up to become a U.S. Army medical officer, just like Eleanor. She'd heard vague things growing up. A nurse in the war, a mystery no one talked about. When she asked about her grandmother, her father's jaw would tighten. Her mother would simply say, She died in France and changed the subject. The name hung over the family like fog. Never addressed, never gone. Laura had no intention of dredging up old ghosts. She was in Paris that summer, working on a military medical history paper. Her assignment was dry, cataloging field hospital procedures during World War II. Days were spent flipping through dusty files and faded records in the Army archives, her eyes burning under fluorescent lights as she traced inventory lists and casualty forms. Then she found it. A thin manila folder was misfiled between logistics reports. It was stamped "Confidential, France, 1942." She opened it with idle curiosity. Inside was a photograph. Laura froze. The woman in the picture stared back across 40 years with sharp eyes, and a jawline Laura had seen in the mirror her whole life. Eleanor Whitford, in uniform, wearing a Red Cross armband, standing beside 3 men in German military uniforms. They weren't prisoners. They weren't her captors. They were posing. It looked like a candid snapshot outside the ruins of a bombed-out church. The back was dated September 1942, weeks after her supposed execution. Laura's stomach dropped. She carefully returned the photo to the folder and walked, hands trembling, to the archivist's desk. "Excuse me," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Do you have personnel records for Lieutenant Eleanor Whitford, Army Nurse Corps? 1941 to 1942? The woman typed at her terminal, then frowned. "Yes," she said, "but her file is restricted." Classified under military intelligence, Laura blinked. Classified? For a nurse? The archivist's looks turned guarded. "You'll need a special clearance to access it. That's all I can tell you, classified. After 40 years. Laura left the archives in a daze. Something didn't add up. Why had her grandmother's service record been sealed? Why had her family received a letter calling her a traitor, but the Army still kept her file under lock and key? That night, she stared at the photograph for hours. It didn't make sense. Eleanor had disappeared during an artillery attack. If she'd survived, where would she have gone? And what had she been doing with German soldiers weeks later? More importantly, why lie about it? Laura's instincts kicked in. She wasn't just a curious granddaughter anymore. She was an officer, a researcher, and maybe the only person alive who had a reason to care. She began quietly reaching out to veterans associations. She posted inquiries, asking if anyone had served near Rouen in 1942. Then she followed a lead, an old cafe on the outskirts of town where former soldiers still gathered to play cards and drink coffee. She approached a table of gray-haired men in the corner. "Excuse me," she said. "I'm looking for anyone who served near the evacuation hospitals in 1942. One man looked up slowly. "You Army?" "Yes," she said. "Captain Laura Whitford, Medical Corps. My grandmother was a nurse, Eleanor Whitford." The man's expression darkened. He stood, pushing his chair back hard enough to scrape the floor. "I remember that name," he said. "She got men killed. Fed German positions. Don't go digging, young lady. Some things are better left buried." He walked out without another word. Laura stood stunned, the weight of his judgment pressing down hard. But she wasn't walking away. Whatever they were trying to hide, she was going to find it. The man's words echoed in Laura's ears as she left the cafe. She got men killed. Don't go digging. She didn't sleep that night. The photo of Eleanor, tucked into a folder in her hotel desk, felt like a spark sitting on dry kindling. If her grandmother had really been executed for treason, why did her personnel file remain sealed under military intelligence? And what exactly happened in those missing weeks between the artillery barrage and the letter branding her a traitor? The next day, Laura returned to the library, determined to dig deeper. She spent hours combing through microfilm records, searching for anything linked to Eleanor, the hospital unit, or that particular week in August 1942. As she scanned faded typewritten pages, a soft voice broke her focus. "You're searching for Lieutenant Whitford." Laura turned sharply. Behind her stood an elderly man with thick glasses, a walking stick, and a gentle but tired gaze. His frame was frail, but his voice carried weight. He introduced himself as Dr. Samuel Cowles. "I worked with the OSS in '42, he said. "I knew your grandmother." Laura's pulse spiked. You knew her?" "Yes," he nodded. "Not just as a nurse. As an operative. One of the best. One of the bravest." Laura stared. "Wait, operative? You mean intelligence?" Cowles lowered himself into the chair across from her. "They told your family she was a traitor." "That was a lie. Eleanor was working under deep cover. Her assignment was delicate. Pass false intelligence to German contacts, while using her role as a nurse to smuggle information and aid the resistance. She helped rescue downed pilots, protected wounded prisoners, and passed coded messages back to us. She saved more lives than anyone will ever know." Laura was speechless. Cowles leaned closer. "She wasn't caught by the Germans. She was silenced by her own." Her stomach turned cold. "Why?" "Because she found something she wasn't supposed to," he said grimly. "She uncovered a ring of American officers selling troop positions to the Germans for money. Real men. High up. She was going to expose them. And instead," Laura whispered, "they buried her." Cowles nodded. "Branded her a traitor. Destroyed her name. And they didn't stop there." He reached into his coat and pulled out a faded OSS document, stamped confidential. Laura unfolded it slowly. "Operative EW reports discovery of high-level betrayal. Multiple U.S. officers confirmed accepting German payments. Request immediate extraction. Networks compromised. They know about me. It was signed with her grandmother's initials. Eleanor had sent one last message, and it had been ignored. On purpose." Laura stared at the transmission, her heart pounding. "Who?" she asked. "Who betrayed her?" Cowles didn't hesitate. "Major Conrad White. He was one of the officers she identified. After the war, he disappeared. Resurfaced under a new name, Charles Benton." Laura's breath caught. "The Charles Benton? The businessman? Philanthropist? Patriot? Fundraiser," Cowles said bitterly. "But make no mistake. He's a traitor who built a comfortable life off blood money. And he's still alive." Laura gripped the edge of the table. "You're certain?" "I tracked the Swiss account he used, the same one Eleanor's notes mentioned. He still draws from it." Cowles looked her dead in the eye. "If you want to clear her name, Captain, you'll have to confront him." Laura left the library with the file tucked inside her coat. Outside, the streets of Paris buzzed with life, but she barely heard it. Her grandmother hadn't been a coward, or a spy, or a deserter. She had been a soldier, and a hero. And someone had killed her to protect a betrayal buried deep inside the American war machine. As Laura walked back to her hotel, her mind was already racing. This wasn't just family history anymore. This was a mission. She was going to finish what Eleanor started. The name Charles Benton echoed in Laura's thoughts like a war drum. Major Conrad White, a man who betrayed his country, sold troop positions to the enemy, and orchestrated the cover-up of a loyal American nurse, her grandmother. Now he walked free under a different name, celebrated as a philanthropist and patriot. Laura spent the next several days obsessively following every lead Dr. Cowles had given her. She combed through OSS records, cross-referenced transmissions, and pulled banking data. The Swiss account listed in Eleanor's coded notes still existed. She found decades of steady deposits from shell corporations, all routed through wartime channels. And the name, drawn from the account in the present day? Charles Benton. There was no doubt anymore. Benton wasn't just involved. He was the link. Then came another chilling reminder that she wasn't the only one watching. Late one night, after leaving the Paris archives, Laura walked toward her hotel with a stack of photocopied files clutched tightly under her arm. At the corner, a black sedan idled. Its headlights were off. As she passed, the passenger window rolled down. "Captain Whitford," a voice called softly. She froze. The man inside was pale, mid-60s, wearing a dark coat. His accent was faintly German. His expression was unreadable. "You're digging in places best left forgotten," he said. "Close the file. Go home, or you'll end up like your grandmother." Then the window rolled up, and the car pulled away into the night. Laura stood there, pulse hammering in her ears. This wasn't just a paper trail anymore. It was real. It was dangerous, and someone had just threatened her life. The next morning, she met Cowles at their usual cafe. His hands shook as he lifted his teacup. "They came to me, too," he said softly. "Asked what I told you." "Are you safe?" she asked. He chuckled bitterly. "At my age? Safe is a fantasy. But you still have time to walk away." Laura shook her head. "They branded my grandmother a traitor. They killed her to protect themselves." "I won't stop now." Cowles studied her, then slowly slid a folded sheet across the table. "This is her final transmission. Keep it close. It's what they fear most." Laura unfolded it. The ink had faded, but the words were still legible. "Have identified 3 American officers taking German payments. Evidence secured. Request immediate extraction. Networks compromised. They know about me. E.W." It was Eleanor's last message, her cry for help, her death sentence, her legacy. With her dossier complete, Laura booked a flight to Boston. Benton lived in New England and was scheduled to appear as the guest of honor at a veterans fundraiser. It was perfect. She arrived in uniform, carrying a locked case full of documents. The photo, the transmission, the bank records, and Eleanor's OSS file. The ballroom shimmered with flags, medals, and polished shoes. Benton stood near the stage, silver-haired, tall, smiling as people thanked him for his service. Laura approached. "Mr. Benton?" He turned, eyes scanning her uniform. When he read her name tag, his smile tightened. "Whitford." "Yes," she said evenly. "Laura Whitford, granddaughter of Lieutenant Eleanor Whitford." There was a moment, just a flicker, where something behind his eyes shifted. Recognition, alarm, contempt. "I remember the name," he said smoothly. "Your grandmother was a complicated woman." "She was a hero," Laura said. "Or a traitor," he replied, eyes gleaming. "Depending on how you tell the story." Laura stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I know who you are, Conrad White. I know about the Swiss account. I know you betrayed her for the first time." His smile broke. "Not fully, but enough." Then he patted her hand like a grandfather offering advice. "You should be proud," he said. "You're as stubborn as she was." But stubbornness got her killed. "Do you want to share her fate?" He turned and vanished into the crowd. Laura stood there, shaken, but more certain than ever. She had confirmation. He knew who she was. He remembered Eleanor, and he was still trying to scare her off. But this time, Eleanor's story wouldn't be buried. Not by threats, power, After Boston, Laura returned to Paris. But everything felt different now. She had confronted the man responsible for destroying her grandmother's life, and he hadn't denied a thing. Instead, he'd issued a threat as casually as a handshake. Stubbornness got her killed. Do you want to share her fate? He meant it. And Laura knew now she was being watched. She began seeing the same car on her route to the archives. A man across the street with a camera. Hotel room drawers were slightly off from where she left them. Then, one night, she came home to find her apartment door slightly ajar. She froze. Slowly, she pushed it open. Inside, chaos. Papers scattered. Her luggage was rummaged through. Her notes, files, and Eleanor's photograph were gone. Except for one thing. The photocopy of Eleanor's final OSS transmission, hidden inside a hollowed-out medical textbook, was untouched. They'd missed it. Laura sat down at her desk, heart pounding. She held the photocopy tight. Eleanor's final message, now her last line of defense. They know about me. Someone had known about Eleanor in 1942. And someone still knew about Laura now. She met Dr. Cowles again the next morning. His usual calm was gone. His hands trembled as he sipped his tea. They came to me again, he said quietly. Asked what I told you. How much do you know? Are you okay? She asked. He gave a thin, bitter smile. At my age, Captain, I've little left to lose. But they won't let this go quietly. Laura nodded, her voice hardening. I don't care. They called my grandmother a traitor. She was murdered to protect men like Benton. I won't stop until her name is cleared. Cowles stared at her for a long moment. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. This is a copy of her final transmission, he said. But there's more. There are still pieces hidden, pieces they don't know I kept. What kind of pieces? Laura asked. He hesitated. Names, coordinates, photos, bank transfers. I've hidden them. If anything happens to me, they'll try to destroy it all. Laura leaned in. Then we make it public. Cowles gave a slow nod. One more meeting, tomorrow morning. Memorial Grounds, 0900. I'll bring everything. That was the last time Laura saw him alive. The next day, she waited at the memorial until 1000 hours. Cowles never arrived. At noon, she saw the headline in the local paper. Dr. Samuel Cowles, 86, dies of apparent heart failure. Laura didn't believe it. She rushed to his apartment. It had already been searched. Bookshelves overturned, filing cabinets emptied. But Laura had learned to look deeper. In the fireplace, behind a loose brick, she found a small metal tin. Inside, photographs, coated microfilm strips, bank documents, a coded list of American officers connected to German payments, coordinates for a location in northern France, and a handwritten note in Cowles's shaky script. If I don't make it, give this to the world. Eleanor deserves it. Laura sat on the floor, shaking. This wasn't just enough to clear Eleanor's name. This was enough to burn the whole lie down. She made an anonymous call to the French authorities, told them to investigate the coordinates listed in the tin. An old, bombed-out farmhouse near Rouen, long since abandoned. She didn't say her name. She just gave them the truth. The call was anonymous. The voice was calm, deliberate. A French officer at the other end of the line scribbled the coordinates without asking questions. All he was told was this: there's something buried in the forest near Rouen. Something from the war. You'll want to bring forensic specialists. Then the line went dead. 3 days later, a French archaeological team arrived at the ruins of a bombed-out farmhouse tucked deep in the woods outside Rouen. The place had been shelled in 1942 and left to rot. Locals avoided it. Some claimed the land was cursed. The scientists moved methodically, clearing brush, scanning for metal, and digging carefully. And then they found it, a section of stone flooring that didn't match the surrounding debris. Beneath it, a hidden hatch, rusted shut. They forced it open. The stench hit them first. Old death, preserved in damp soil and rotted cloth. Inside, they found a sealed underground cellar, untouched since the war. At the far end, slumped against the wall, were skeletal remains. Several men, bound at the wrists, wearing tattered uniforms from the Allied forces. One still had dog tags clutched in his fingers. They had been prisoners, likely dragged here during the chaos, then executed and buried in silence. But in the corner, something else. A rusted U.S. Army medical kit. Its brass nameplate still faintly legible. Lieutenant E. Whitford. Next to it lay the fragmented remains of a nurse's uniform, the Red Cross insignia barely visible. Besides that, a bundle of wax-sealed cloth. Inside, coded notes, carefully preserved, faded but intact. Back in Paris, word of the discovery reached Laura through a trusted contact in the archives. She met with the scientists the same day. When they handed her the brass-plated medical kit, her throat tightened. Her grandmother's initials, still shining through the rust. Eleanor hadn't vanished. She hadn't fled. She had died with her patients, trying to protect them until the very end. The wax-wrapped bundle of notes, once carefully dried and decoded, confirmed everything. They matched Eleanor's OSS transmissions, her final messages, her last mission. Names of the officers she had identified, bank accounts, movement orders, even a last desperate line scrawled on the corner of one sheet. "They've found me. I'm staying with the wounded. I won't run." Laura clutched the bundle like sacred scripture. This was it. Physical evidence. No more speculation. And rumors. Eleanor Whitford hadn't deserted. She hadn't betrayed her country. She had been murdered while doing her duty. With the evidence in hand, Cowell's tin, the transmission copy, the banking data, and now the bodies in the cellar, Laura contacted a congressional investigator who had quietly been looking into World War II cover-ups. She laid it all out. Every piece, every name, every date. There was no room for denial now. Within weeks, the case was presented to a closed military review committee. The report was airtight. Eleanor had been an undercover OSS operative, her record destroyed to cover up a treasonous conspiracy among American officers. She had died in service, protecting Allied prisoners. In December 1982, the U.S. Army formally reversed its original judgment. Lieutenant Eleanor Whitford's name was cleared. She was posthumously awarded the Silver Star for gallantry. Her portrait, once hidden, was hung in the Army Medical Museum. The shame that had haunted the Whitford family for 4 decades finally lifted, and the farmhouse outside Rouen became a memorial site, honoring the nurse who gave her life defending the helpless. But Laura wasn't done yet. She had one final stop to make. The day the Army reversed its judgment was cold and gray in Washington. But for Laura Whitford, it felt like spring breaking through. The military's official ruling was clear. Lieutenant Eleanor Whitford had not been a traitor, but a covert operative who had died in the line of duty. The evidence, the OSS transmission, the banking records, the skeletal remains in Rouen, the coded notes, was irrefutable. After 40 years of silence, her honor was restored. But one man still hadn't answered for what he'd done. Charles Benton, once known as Major Conrad White, had lived comfortably for decades. He gave speeches about patriotism, funded veteran memorials, shook hands with senators, and posed for magazine covers. But beneath the charm and money, he had always been something else. A man who sold out his country and murdered a fellow soldier to hide it. And Laura was done watching him walk free. She arranged a meeting with the congressional investigator who had helped her. Together, they prepared a full dossier, copies of every document, banking transfers, OSS files, Eleanor's final messages, Cowell's list of co-conspirators, and photographs from the cellar in the woods. The committee brought Benton in for questioning under his real name, Conrad White. He denied everything. "I don't know this woman," he said, his voice steady. "I served honorably. This is some mix-up, fabrication, propaganda." But the documents told a different story. His name appeared on wartime financial records, payments traced to the Swiss account linked to German intelligence. Transfers continued into the late 1970s, each one drawn under aliases, all pointing back to him. The investigators presented false identity documents from 1945, ones he had forged to disappear. They showed photos of Major White and Charles Benton side by side. Eleanor's handwritten coded notes, authenticated by ink analysis, proved U.S. officer Conrad White and others had accepted enemy funds, exposing Benton and shattering his reputation. Overnight, the decorated patriot became a disgraced traitor. Awards vanished, institutions erased his name, and he died in obscurity. But Eleanor's honor was finally restored. Her name was engraved on the Wall of Valor and a memorial in Rouen, recognizing her as both an Army nurse and OSS operative. At the dedication, granddaughter Laura stood proudly in uniform, silver star on her chest, knowing Eleanor's sacrifice and courage were no longer forgotten, but forever remembered. Thanks for watching. If you want more mysterious true stories, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Drop your theories in the comments. What do you think really happened?